102.
WhatsApp us now on 072 702 1702.
Dr. Codrington, good evening and thank you for joining us this evening.
Hi, Gushwell. My pleasure.
Great stuff. I mean, if we have to look at the, post COVID-19 world, does it look like the Book of Eli, that famous Denzel Washington movie, or is it The Road where, you are stuck with your children or your child walking this long road with nothing else but a shotgun and the clothes on your back and hoping to find food along the way? Or is there some positivity that we can take out of this, as difficult as it might be to see it now?
And absolutely. I must actually add the Book of Eli. I watched it a number of years ago. But, I'm rewatching movies like Contagion and 28 Days. I see those are all trending at the moment on Netflix.
At least I don't feel, you've just made me not feel too weird because I've been doing the same thing.
But you know what? It's an important question to ask, of course, especially as we only at the start of a number of weeks of lockdown. And there's two ways to answer your question, of course. The one is to look quite far into the future, and by that I mean 2, 3, 4 years, and we know for sure that we will beat this virus. The worst case scenario for us right now is that it just gets worse and worse and worse. There's another flare-up in the next few months, and then they get the vaccine. The doctors are working. They tell us that they are moving faster than anyone's ever moved in history before to get a vaccine. And we know this thing can be beaten. We've sequenced the DNA of the SARS, the underlying virus itself. We understand how the disease works. We're beginning to get, there's research papers. I think more research papers have been published on this virus already than on any other virus in history. So it's kind of, we're on it and we will beat it. And the worst case scenario is this time next year, a vaccine will be available. We'll all get inoculated and this will go back to being like a flu. Where we get a vaccine every year and it's done and dealt with. And then, of course, we start putting the world back together. Your question is important when we think about that far distant future, because I don't think we're ever going to go back to normal. And I think people need to stop thinking about, when do we get back to normal? Because just like things like the Second World War, and if you go further back in history, the bubonic plague, these things we must understand that they fundamentally change the power structures of the world. And that is definitely going to happen to us. And we can chat about that in a moment. So that's one answer to your question. The second answer is, of course, what's going to happen in the next 3 weeks, which for most of us, that's as much of the future as we can handle at the moment. And there's also good news. Everybody's getting a taste of what I do for a living now. My business card has the word futurist on it. And some people think that means I've got a crystal ball and I look into the future. I mean, if only that was possible. What futurists do is we take information that exists in other parts of the world or maybe in other industries. And we try and track these trends and then bring them to the client or the country or the person that we're working with. So if we're working with a car company, we try and look at what's going on with computer games. We look at what's going on in the retail sector. We look at what's happening in tourism. And we see if there are any trends or interesting things that are happening, and then we try and help the car manufacturer understand that. And we can do that now with COVID. It's actually remarkable because we've got a few countries that are ahead of us. They started lockdown a few weeks ago, and we can see what happens as soon as you do that. And it's really good news. So all the countries that started lockdown a number of weeks ago, here's what happens. The first week, nothing happens. Okay, because lockdown takes a little bit of while to get into your psyche. Your previous two guests were helping us understand it didn't just happen on Thursday midnight. There were a whole lot of people who only got paid on Friday. We can't expect them to go lockdown. I have a credit card. I was able to go out on Wednesday. If you only got paid on Friday, well, Saturday's your shopping day. So we give them a gap. Now you've got social grants, end of month. We've got to give them a little bit of a gap. So actually, we haven't really started our lockdown yet. You know, so the clock has to start ticking again. As soon as kind of tomorrow and Tuesday's over. And honestly, we mustn't begrudge these people that. This is the nature of our country. We understand that. So we then get lockdown started, but nothing really happens for a week after that. And the reason for that, if people want to understand it, is that this virus takes between 5 and 14 days. But for most people, it's about 5 to 10 days. It's in that window for the symptoms to show. So you might be sitting at home now in lockdown. You're feeling fine. You've got no symptoms. You think, right, I'm trying to be safe from the virus. You've actually got it. You don't know you've got it. It's going to be 5 days. It's going to be 7 days, maybe 10 days before the symptoms show. You might then give it to everybody in your house and they take 4 days, 5 days, 10 days. And that's why we've got to have this whole 21 days. And to be honest, it will probably be extended. Every country that has had this has extended the time as well. So the first week, nothing happens because we've got to see who's sick. The second week is even worse because suddenly we get all the people who are sick, they have the symptoms, they report themselves to say, I've got the symptoms, can I have some help, please? And so we're going to be 2 weeks into lockdown, and we're going to think, what are we doing with lockdown? It's just getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it gets better because, of course, the good news is 90% of people recover from this reasonably easily. I know some people, it's a tough disease if it really hits you hard, but 90% of people recover easily. And, of course, once you have had it, you also have some immunity to it. Not complete immunity. You can't just do whatever you like, but there is some immunity to it. And you can kind of be a little bit more confident about the way that you interact with other people.
Sure.
So when we kind of beat this thing, you have a sudden improvement. That's what China has seen. That's what South Korea has seen. Spain at the moment is just about to end the nightmare, and they will begin to see positives come. I think Italy today was their second day where they had, a decrease in the number of cases and there's sort of positive signs. And so, short-term future for South Africa, I think we've done the right thing. We're on a path now, and we have to hold the line. We have to get everybody locked down within the next 2 or 3 days, and then we've got to hold out those 21 days. And we will beat this thing. That is the good news. We are going to beat this. Whether it's now in the next month or two or whether it's over the course of the rest of this year, we will get this done.
But I mean, how does it change the world thereafter? Because I was thinking about 9/11 and the impact that it had on the world. I mean, prior to, the 11th of September, 2001, you could carry your razor blade that you shave with on your, in your carry-on luggage. I mean, a lot of people did that because ultimately if the airline lost your luggage, then the most essential things, your vaslap and your soap and that, your razor blade, those types of things, your toothpaste, all of those things would be, at least you'd have that. Now we know that you can only carry so much toothpaste, you can only carry so much deodorant, etc., etc. Your security checks have improved. You have to take your shoes off in all kinds of countries and goodness knows whatever else. Is corona or the COVID-19 virus in particular going to change practices globally, especially in and around contagions that spread globally?
Well, look, I've heard some of the advisors to President Obama have said that whenever President Obama was asked, what is the thing that keeps you awake at night? What is the thing you are most scared of? And this was throughout his 8 years as president. He always said a pandemic. He said the scenarios that his teams played out, which is the scenarios we are living now, he said is the most disruptive thing that he could imagine in the world. Worse than a war, worse than an asteroid hitting the planet, because this hits everybody everywhere and it's so difficult to contain. So what we know now is that each new virus that emerges, because remember, this isn't the last one we're going to see in our lifetimes. Each new one has this potential again. So we are going to absolutely have to come together as a world and talk about how we handle the movement of people around the world. So some of the changes that are going to take place are people are going to be a lot more nervous of traveling. I've already spoken to business people who said, I used to travel 6-8 times a year to visit suppliers and customers overseas.
Sure.
And now I'm not going to do that, but I've already had my first Skype conversation with them, and it went brilliantly. And I'm now wondering, even, if we go back to normal, there's that word again, but, 3 years from now, I might only ever make 1 trip or 2 trips a year, and I'll do the rest virtually. People who are now working from home, their bosses never thought that would work. They might discover not only does it works better than going to the office. You don't have rush hour traffic. You're not paying rental in a, Sandton or Cape Town city centre office. There's, and the bosses might say, don't come back to the office. You're doing brilliantly at home. Just stay there.
We can only dream. We can only dream.
No, but this is the point. I think that there are some simple ways in which we can easily imagine the world would change around travel and geography. I hope we never go back to shaking hands again. I really am not a huge fan of doing that. I think there are some wonderful ways of greeting people without having to share your germs, So we might all go the Asian route in the future of just sort of putting our hands together and bowing slightly. So those are
the elbow bump is in. I bet the elbow bump is in now.
the foot tap, that came out of your arm. That might work for the millennials. I don't know. And so those are simple ones, but there are also some very profound ones as well, Gushwell. So let me just give you 2 examples.
Sure.
I can picture now. Look, America is scaring me at the moment more than anything, because imagine we all have to lock down here as South Africans, right? And we know the importance of that. But we also have to all lock down as the world. If America doesn't lock down and Americans just travel all over the planet, this is like global warming. If only one country gets it right and everybody else doesn't, we haven't solved the problem. And America, I think only a few states have woken up at the moment, not all 50 of those states. They are the global superpower. Let's say we recover from COVID in the next month or 2. We're ready to go, but our American suppliers, our American customers, our American counterparts are not allowed to move because they started their lockdown way too late. They're totally consumed with, sorting out their problems. Think about the EU and so on. The world economy could shift because, now think about this one, who's the only big country that's available to trade with at the moment? And that would be China, right?
Yeah.
So China gets an opportunity because they got it first, they dealt with it first, now they are free to trade and move around. And China steps up, especially stepping up into Africa. We know they already targeted Africa as trading partners and so on. This gives them a gap to do it while everybody else is literally locked down and can't do anything.
Yeah.
And I think that we could see that, history might look back and say, what an unbelievable thing happened that just shifted trading partnerships, shifted relationships. And I don't say that in a scary way. I actually think that might be to South Africa in particular. We are one of the very first countries, and certainly we're one of only a few countries in Africa that have done this lockdown first. If we deal with it and we come out of it, we could also do the same into the rest of Africa. And where we might have battled in the past to become a supplier to Africa and build trade links into the continent, maybe we'll be perfectly placed to get this right.
And it's fascinating what you're saying about the USA, especially because I'm looking at the global statistics. And they're standing, as we speak, at 138,000. almost 139,000, whereas Italy standing at 98,000, and everyone was going on about Italy. China, where this virus originated, is sitting at 81,439. And it's true what you're saying, that they're dealing with it, they're reducing their numbers. So it could change what we refer to as global economics and political power.
And let me give you another example that's closer to home and brings us back to social grants and things like that. A few weeks ago, we were locked in conversations with each other about how our country was working and not working and what's broken and what isn't. And NHI, this National Health Insurance was on the cards. Now, that is clearly going to have to be delayed because we're not going to be able to afford it for a few years until we've dealt with paying back the loans we have to take to get through COVID. But hopefully when the conversation around NHI emerges again in a few years' time, the rich people in the country who were maybe opposed to NHI might have a slightly different view of it now, because right now I am as safe, you are as safe as the poorest person in this country. If we've got now people in Khayelitsha who are getting it, and so on. I am as safe as they are. If somebody, if a security guard or the guy who's going to collect my garbage tomorrow, if he's got COVID and he leaves COVID on my dustbin, I'm pulling that dustbin back into my property. He's delivered an essential service, but he's also delivered COVID. I'm not blaming him. I'm just saying that I'm exposed as he is because we live in society together. And we're not rich and poor. I can't put a wall up around my property and say, COVID, stay out.
Exactly.
And we have to remember now in South Africa, I think, that we don't want to go back to normal, because the normal we had is part of the problem. And I really honestly hope, and I know I sound to many people as being stupidly optimistic and crazily idealistic, but I honestly believe that we should spend at least some of the hours we are in lockdown now imagining a South Africa that's different. We get this opportunity to reset, like what's it, Control Alt Delete, boom, reboot.
Doc, I think that's exactly the note on which we'll have to end because of time. But really, much appreciated. You gave us a lot to think about. Definitely plenty for us to talk about during the open line. That was, of course, Dr. Graeme Codrington speaking to us about this as a futurist.